Well, welcome FFG. I've been asked, I'm Bill Butler, the regional manager for the Phoenix area, and I've been asked to conduct a episode for FFG TV. We're actually going to cover two topics today. First one is how to actually find money for our clients. You know, there's a lot of times we show them something they like, but then they come back and tell us they don't have any money, and sometimes we need to help them find that money. So we'll talk about that. Secondly, I've been asked to talk about how can we make the illustration as hot as possible. You know, it can make a big difference in your chance of making or breaking a sale. And so we'll talk about that as well. Now, I'm actually in front of my region here. I'd like the Dream Team to say hello to FFG. Hello! So there are people here, and I'll be talking with them primarily, but hopefully we can help each other. Now, are you able to see the screen without this in it? Can you adjust the camera? Okay, good. All right, now when it comes to finding money, I look at it as there's two types, general types of people. One type, have you ever been in front of somebody where they tell you that they don't have anything saved for their future? Have you ever seen that?
Oh, yes.
Okay, and so sometimes we need to be the first one to help them actually make saving for their future a high enough priority that they can start. The other type that we'll talk about are people that already are saving for their future, and then we have to find money in addition to what they're presently doing or instead of what they're presently doing. So, I have a little sheet that I use if I am giving a first presentation and I find that early on, you should be finding out what type of person you're talking with. As a matter of fact, on the first presentation, in the manual, what I would suggest is as soon as you've introduced them to our company, before you get into the 7 steps, find out who you're talking with. It's a big difference whether they've been saving for decades or never saved a dime. You need to know that early on. I would say something like, just as there's a lot of problems, we also have 7 different solutions to help people. Luckily, most people don't need help in all 7 areas. So would it be all right with you, Frank, if I ask you a few questions to find out which of these I should be focusing on in your case?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. And then what I would do is get the F&A out and start taking notes. And some of the questions you want to ask early on are his age, his retirement age goal, how much money he would like to have at retirement, and if he's started saving for the future yet. If so, right down here where it has the assets, you'd indicate the assets he has and the type. 401k, stocks, mutual funds, whatever. Okay? That will give you, that little bit of information will give you a good head start. Now let's say in this case, Frank has said, you know what, I just haven't really saved anything for my future yet. Okay? So if that was the case, then what I'm going to do is put aside my normal presentation, put it on hold for a few minutes, and talk to Frank heart to heart. Because if I can't get into his heart where he sees how important it is to save for his future, we're not going to go anywhere. And so I might talk to him without trying to embarrass him too much, but to still try to get to the root of the matter. And so I would say something like this. Frank, let me ask you, do you feel like you're in the money game?
Right now, no.
Okay. You know what? The money game is the most important game you'll ever play in your life. And the reason I say that is because your whole financial future depends on it. That's one reason. The other reason is it takes about 40 years for most of us to play this game, from our 20s till our 60s. And unlike most games that you lose, it's no big deal, you can always play another game. Well, in the money game, it takes 40 years, you don't have another 40 years. If you lose the game, you're up in your 60s and realizing for the first time you'll never be able to quit working. Unless you move in with the kids or try to get by on Social Security. And none of those are very good options. On the other hand, if you win the game, you can literally afford to take the rest of your life off and still have a comfortable lifestyle. And that's what we're trying to help people get to become financially independent. So, the question I have for you, Frank, is if you don't save for your future, who will?
Nobody.
So you see where your whole financial future depends on you and your ability to save.
Mhm.
Okay? Now, let's talk time here. Let's imagine this is a timeline, and at this point you're about how old?
60.
60.
Yeah.
Okay. And so if this was the timeline, most of us are working from our 20s till our 60s, hopefully live to our 80s or more. That's just sort of the norm. So if this was the game, do you see how you're coming into this game, or we're talking to you in the last part of the fourth quarter?
Mhm.
You can't possibly expect your future to all of a sudden turn around and be completely different if you don't do something different.
Right.
Now, I realize that some people aren't saving for their future, not because they don't want to, but because they just literally don't have any money. So what I want to do is see if we can maybe help find some money for you so that it can work for you as hard as you do for it. Wouldn't that be nice for a change?
That'd be great.
Okay? So let's imagine this little diagram here. There's a rule of thumb in the industry of how much we should be saving for our future if we want our future to be as comfortable as our present is. And the rule of thumb is that we should be saving at least 10% of our income for our future. Can I ask you presently what your income is? Whatever you'd like to say.
75,000.
$75,000, okay? So doing some quick math, that would be $7,500 would be 10%. And on a monthly basis, that would be about $600 a month, give or take, okay? Do you feel presently that, like, if it was important enough for you, that that would be a possibility? It would have to be awfully important, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Okay?
Yep.
If you were to save, see, the problem with most people is they're not saving 10% for their future, they're not saving anything for their future. And if it's 0% for the future, that means 100% is going toward the present, or vice versa. So what we have to do, first of all, is make it move it up on the priority list so that you can save something. 10% would be a good number to shoot for. If not that, 5% is a lot better than nothing. Some people are doing better than 10%. If you save 10% for the future, that leaves 90% for the present. And what we found is that that really doesn't affect your lifestyle too much. Most people can live just as comfortably on 90% as they can 100%. But this difference over here is life-changing. Because if zero's going in, it doesn't matter how good the rate of return is, how many years you can give it, it's still zero coming out. Now, here's another problem. Most of us are earning a paycheck, typically, let's say, every 2 weeks, and you're working hard for that paycheck, aren't you?
Yeah.
Okay? But when was the last time you had a paycheck where there wasn't somebody with their hands out? Some company. It could be the mortgage company, utility, gas company, car company, grocery store, etc.
Yeah.
They all expect some of your monthly income, don't they?
Sure do.
The problem is it's not fair because they didn't earn a penny of that. And so most of us are paying our bills, trying to be responsible, and then if there's anything left over, that's what you get. After all of these others have had their share, okay? And then if you do get some, what most of us are doing is spending it. The other option is to save it for the future. But for most people, this is sort of a priority list, and it seems like saving for the future is about the last thing on the priority list. And that's the biggest reason why a lot of people just never really get started saving. So I have a little trick for you. What I would recommend is like what we used to do back in school. Cut in line. Pay yourself first. You may have heard of that. And the way you do it is you make this a priority, a big enough priority, that it happens every month. And the way to do that is to set up something. Decide where you want to save, but set it up where every month some money out of your paycheck is automatically going into another account. Once you make that decision once, you don't have to make it every month. Okay? Now, what I learned a long time ago was from a gentleman named Jim Rohn at a motivational speech. He said, in life there's two prices. And the good news is you don't have to pay them both. But you can't get away from paying one of them. And I'm getting intrigued at the moment, and I'm thinking, what are you talking about? And then he went on to say that the prices that you pay are the price of discipline or regret. And he started to elaborate. Gave me an example. Let's say you're trying to lose weight. Okay? You have two choices. You can pay the price of discipline, which would be exercise and diet, or the price of regret, which would be not losing any weight. Okay? Well, in saving for your future, it's very similar. The price of discipline would be saving hundreds of dollars a month for your future. The price of regret would be missing out on the hundreds of thousands of dollars that you could have throughout your retirement years. Now, the only good news about the price of regret is you can procrastinate it. You don't have to pay it now, you can pay it later. But it will catch up to you if you don't do the discipline. So my question to you is, which price would you rather pay? Hundreds of dollars a month, or the hundreds of thousands of dollars that you'd be missing out on down the road?
Hundreds a month.
Okay, so now what we need to do is just determine how many hundreds. Okay? 10% of your income is $600 a month. How many hundreds do you think you could realistically, yet generously, do for your future?
Probably at least that.
Great. I'm glad that we've had this little talk, because if saving for your future isn't important, it won't ever get done.
Right.
And I'm sorry, the bad news is you're already well into the game. The good news is you got to make every day count. And we can help you with that by getting the dollars to work harder for you.
Okay.
All right, now, let's shift gears and say that we are meeting with someone who already has an income and they are saving for their future, and they may have dollars that we found out early on in the presentation that they have an IRA, a 401k, etc. Now, at some point toward the end of the presentation, one of the questions we should certainly be asking is, if I were to come back and show you something, and let's say, Jim, that you're this person, that you really liked, that fit within your budget, could you think of any reason why you wouldn't want to save for your future?
Absolutely not.
Okay, great. So saving's important to you, and I recognize that because you're already doing that, right? But what we want to do is show you how your dollars can work even harder if it has no market risk and no taxes taken away from it. Okay? So on a monthly basis, if you found something you liked, what do you think you could put away for your future realistically?
Realistically, $400.
Okay, $400. Up to
5.
up to 500. Okay. So one of the tips that I would give you, FFG, is whenever they give you a dollar amount to work with, get in the habit of responding to that amount with two words, up to. And typically what that does is help them think a little bit bigger. Oftentimes the up to amount is twice the normal amount. Now, the thing about this little trick, in the lower right-hand corner of the F&A, it has a money finder. This little box is invaluable. You need to learn how to use this to your own advantage. If you're making sales, but they're consistently $100 or $200 a month, you're not finding, in most cases, all the money that you could and should. We want it to be a realistic amount for them, but we want it to be on the generous side, not the conservative side. So this little money finder, this is an enlarged version of it, identifies a half a dozen areas or so that oftentimes we can find lazy money. Money that's just not working as hard for you as you are for it. Okay? So going down the line, let's say, for example, current monthly savings for emergency fund. Are you presently saving money toward an emergency fund?
No.
Okay. Another one, current monthly premium for life insurance. Now play with me, and let's assume that you have some of these expenses, okay? With life insurance, do you presently have life insurance?
Yes,
Okay, great. Is it term or growing in value?
term,
Okay, and your monthly premium is about
$40.
$40 a month. For how much coverage?
150.
Okay, great. Now, why do I want to know that? Because we might have the ability to replace that policy and use those dollars toward the new policy. Now, contributions to your 401k. You have a 401k at work, I believe you said.
Yes.
Okay, great. And is there a match there?
Yes.
Great. Now, normally the match is up to 3%. There are exceptions, but that's the norm. Okay, so you're putting in a percentage of your income and they're matching dollar for dollar the first 3%, right?
Right.
Well, our philosophy as a company is, I would encourage you to keep doing that. That's free money, okay? But I believe you told me that your contribution is about 6%.
That is correct.
Okay, so that means for us as agents, we would be looking at the unmatched portion. In this case, let's say your income is maybe $50,000 a year, then what you're going to do, 3% of that is the unmatched portion. That would be $1,500. And that would be on a monthly basis about $125 a month. And so you want to break it down here to the monthly amount that we could possibly work with, okay? And do you get a tax return typically most years?
Yes.
Yeah, 2,000 or 3,000 maybe? What would you say it is?
About 1,500.
1,500, okay. Now our policy as a company is we don't want to go after all of the tax return, but possibly most of it. In this case, let's maybe leave 500 for him, or 300 for him, and put in 1,200 of the tax return to work it harder for you, which would be about 100 a month. And maybe you have some debts. Are you putting any dollars toward the debts above and beyond the minimum that they're asking?
Some.
Some? About how much a month would you say?
I would probably say maybe a couple of hundred extra.
About 200 a month, okay.
Right.
Now, when we come back as FFG agents, what we want to do, again, is help his dollars be as productive as we can. A lot of people are trying to pay down their debts. Is that a good thing? Go like this? Of course it is. But the problem a lot of people face is they don't realize that saving for their future might be even a better use of those dollars. For example, if you pay off your debts early, it might save you hundreds, possibly thousands of dollars in interest. However, that extra couple of $100s a month, starting 5 years sooner while you're paying down the debts, might turn into tens of thousands of dollars for you down the road. And so, thousands of savings is good, tens of thousands is even better down the road. And then some other options that I found, sometimes you need to ask this, and sometimes it'll just come up in the conversation. Let's say that you've just recently paid off some other debts that you had, maybe a car payment or something like that. Well, that's newfound money. If that's recent history, that car payment of maybe $400 a month is possibly dollars that could be relocated to work toward him now, because it was going toward a creditor, right? Or another type of new money that they can be found is asking if have you recently had a pay raise? If they've done that and they're not used to spending all that new extra income, that might be another $300 a month or whatever. Okay? So here's the point. The money finder takes the money that they gave you, in this case $400 a month, you increased it to $500 by asking up to, and now we found some other dollars. Now if somebody's good at math, could you add up 540, it's 540, 640, 665, 765, 965, 1365, 1665. So what we did here was we went from $400 a month that they initially gave us to $1,665 that are already being spent, with the exception of the new money. Now, I'm not saying that each time you go through this you'll find that many places. You might only find 2 or 3. But oftentimes, what you find is bigger, adding up to be bigger than what they gave you to work with. So now if you go back on a second appointment and they said, you know what, things have changed, I've crunched the numbers and I just don't think we can do anything new money at all. Wouldn't it be nice if you were prepared and said, no problem, because we have 1,665, of which only 500 of that was new money. We have over $1,000 a month that you're already devoting to areas that may not be as productive as they could be. So let me show you what I've put together, and then you tell me if you think it would be a more productive area for these dollars. That's pretty powerful. I remember learning that concept years ago, and it's still helped me to this day. And that may be one of the reasons why my average sale is not 100 or 200 a month, but over 500 a month. Okay, so now we've found some money, either whether they've never saved before or they have a variety of places that they're putting it. Now it's a question of how productive can we make this illustration? Now, as we know, in this business, it's a two-call presentation. In our first appointment, where we're introducing our company and our concepts, you're also introducing yourself. And whether you're aware of it or not, they're sizing you up very quickly with a first impression. And with the rest of the information that you share with them, and how you share it with them. And the goal is, of course, by the end of our first presentation, that they see value. They see someone in you that they can, excuse me, have confidence that you can direct them to where they want to be financially. They get comfortable with Federal Financial Group and our concepts, and the concept of the index strategy. All of that is done. So literally about 70 to 80% of the sale is made emotionally on that first appointment. Now on the second, we're coming in, we're rebuilding that relationship, and we want to continue to build on that and entice them throughout the second presentation. But ultimately, toward the end, we're recommending an index life product most of the time. And the illustration or illustrations that you put together for them can make or break your chances for success, because it's the climax of the second presentation. So, in this case, we're going to make some assumptions. Obviously, the input that we put into an illustration is going to be personalized to your clients based on their age, how much money they told you to work with, and how much time they told you to work with. And then it's up to you to try to make as much as you can out of what they give you to work with. Now, given a choice, like I gave Frank a choice earlier, would you rather, if I could show you how hundreds of dollars a month could turn into hundreds of thousands of dollars throughout retirement, how many feel like that would make a good trade? Pretty unanimous, right? And I hope everybody out there watching is thinking the same way. And in most cases, that's the good news. We can literally, it's almost like a magic trick. You give us hundreds a month over your work years, and we give you back hundreds of thousands. Wow, what a trade. Now, in this case, here are the assumptions. A male, 35-year-old, non-smoker, $500,000 of coverage, $400 a month on the starting premium, and just for your information, when you run that illustration, whatever the numbers are, you're going to find that there's going to be some limits. On the agent-only page, it will identify those limits, and the ones particularly we want to pay attention to are the minimum. In this case, the minimum is just over $3,600 a year, or $300 a month. Now that's a pretty good fit, because he said he could put in $400 a month. Okay? The target premium, that's the amount that you're going to get paid your first year commission on, whether it all happens in the first year or if it even goes into the second year. The 7-pay limit, which is the most you can put in during the first 7 years, if somebody wants to front load this policy. but they can only do that up until the single premium is reached, which usually is around 4 to 5 years. The guideline level, which is the most they can put in on a level basis, an average every year. And that's the maximum amount that we normally are talking to the client about. Now that maximum amount, in this case, on a level death benefit, is $5,500 a year. However, on an increasing death benefit, the minimum and the target stay identical, but the death benefit, the maximum they can contribute now is $14,900 a year. Almost 3 times as much that they can put in every year. Now, I used to be a big believer in running most of my illustrations on a level death benefit because for the same money going in for the same years, it will give a bigger retirement income. And that's because as you're getting older, you're buying less insurance, and so more is going toward the retirement side. However, if people do believe that they can increase their premium throughout the years, then the increasing death benefit gives them a whole lot more room to do that. Okay, so let's say our goal is to get, they gave us a goal of getting to $50,000 a year in retirement income. Would most of you be happy with that, in addition to Social Security? That's a very realistic retirement goal, isn't it, for a lot of people? Well, you know what? If they live for 20 years in retirement, from 65 to 85, that's not hundreds of thousands, that's $1 million. For a lot of people, that's pretty exciting. Let's see how close we can come to that with the information and the ability that they've given us to work with. Now, what I'm going to do is run through several different adjustments that you can make with this illustration so that you can see what a low end and what a high end would be for the time and the money they've given you to work with. Okay? And now, the first one I'm going to show you, this is not one you would normally use, but if you come across someone that has a whole life policy or a universal life policy, what you want to do there is maybe show them how this index life is different from their whole life. And you can do that by simulating a whole life or a universal life policy. And the way you would do that in this first assumption, we're going to assume the rate of return is 4.6%. The way you do that is under the premium strategy, where you have the different options to pick from. You pick the 1-year fixed, which is currently 4.6%. Now, I've picked that because that's a pretty typical response or a return for a whole life to a universal life policy. And if in this case they're putting in $400 a month to age 65, that's $144,000 that they put in. Okay? And then the question is there enough at that point to actually have the option to stop putting money in and still have a death benefit the rest of their life? That's referred to as a paid-up policy. And that's pretty common in whole life policies. They usually have enough to do that. In this case, they have enough to do that and a little bit more. They actually could get back $6,300 a year in retirement. Are you excited yet? Probably not. Because that would take 22.5 years to get all that money back. For most of us, we don't have that much time or that much patience, right? So let's see if we can improve on that. The next assumption, what I've tweaked that to, is going from there to the 1-year point-to-point at 7.45% currently. Okay, so that's an increase of just under 3% per year over the 30 work years. To the same age, same amount of money going in, but what's coming out? Instead of $6,300, you get a bit of a pay raise, $24,000 a year. 4 times as much income. And all we did was increase the rate of return. The nice thing is, 7.45 is not a realistic assumption if it's a universal product, but if it's the index universal life, that's actually a very realistic assumption, based on a 25-year history. As a matter of fact, with the Aviva product, they allow you to illustrate with different strategies. And the one that currently has the highest rate of return is not the 1 year point to point, but the monthly cap option. The monthly cap is currently illustrating at 8.4%. Okay, same money going in for the same years, 144,000, but now the payback is a little bit bigger. Instead of 6,000 or 24,000, 1% more, $7,000 more every year to live on. That's over $500 a month pay raise for the rest of your life. Are we getting there? Is anybody getting excited? All right. 4.5 years is now the payback period. Okay, now for a lot of us, if we didn't know better, we might be thinking, well, I'm maxed out. I can't get any better than that because that's the highest rate of return that we're allowed to illustrate at currently with the Aviva product. So how in the world can we do better than that? Well, let's look. What I'm going to do now is talk about another adjustment you can make. All life insurance policies that grow in value have the same exact tax shelter. And it's a tax-free access to that money in the policy that people can access during their life. And the reason it's tax-free is it's because it's in the form of a loan provision. Now, with most policies, they're going to charge you about 6% on that loan, and they're going to credit you about 4%, leaving you a net loan cost of 2%. Better than any bank in town. Good deal. You better get in line for that one. Until you realize there's actually some companies, not many, but there's a few, maybe 10% of them, that are giving you maybe a zero net cost loan. Now, a zero net cost loan means you're being charged and credited the same amount. Okay? How much better than that can it get, right? And that's what we actually assumed up here. But Aviva offers that. That's a good deal. They offer the fixed loan rate at a 0% net cost. But they also give you a second option that most products do not give you. And this is a variable loan provision. The variable loan provision, instead of charging you maybe 6% and crediting you 4% or even 6%, they're going to charge you what the Moody's corporate bond rate is, and they're going to credit you what the S&P 500 does. And every year that the S&P or the stock market outperforms the bonds, then you're actually making money on the money that they're loaning you. What's better than 0%? An interest that they actually pay you to take their money. And that can happen. Now, the downside of this, if there's a year where the bond does better than the stock market, then you're actually being charged for that loan. But you're still only being charged about the same as most people are in a typical loan anyway. And what difference does it make? Well, instead of $31,000, the variable loan provision, you're up to $45,000. Almost 50% more income to you is available with that assumption. Now, is there anything else we can do? Let's see, we just went to that one. Now let's talk about, and by the way, the variable loan provision, by default on the illustration is set at 6.1% currently. That's supposed to represent not the money that you're earning, the rate of return on the growth. This is supposed to represent the interest rate that's being charged for the loan, which in this case is the Moody's corporate bond rate. So I love the fact that it's not just an arbitrary number that the insurance company assigns, like with whole life and universal life. Both the growth and the loan cost are public figures. And the Moody's corporate bond rate, it fluctuates a little bit, but it's pretty much in the 5 to 6% range, sometimes even lower. On this illustration, as conservative as Aviva is, they are allowing us to drop that interest rate to 4.4%. And it's up to you whether you're comfortable going down that low or not. Personally, I am. And if you did, what difference would it make to the client? Instead of $45,000, it's now $56,000 a year. An extra $11,000 a year. Jim, would that come in handy?
Oh, yeah.
Almost $1,000 a month extra for the rest of your life. What a difference. So look where we've come, from $6,000 to up to over $50,000, which was sort of our goal, wasn't it? We're there. But you know what? I still have a little more time, so let's see how high we can go. Let's imagine that now we're going to use a principle that will work for a lot of your clients. This is what we call the step up in premium. This is for the people that give you $200, $300, $400 a month to start with, but they also believe that in time they're going to be able to put in more, either because they get a pay raise, or because they pay off some debts, or maybe just because they get more disciplined as they get used to the idea of saving. If any of those three things happen, there's a good chance that they can be more generous to their future. So, in this case, we've assumed going from $400 a month in the first year to $500 a month and then $600 a month. Now, that would change something here. That would change the amount of money that you're putting in. Instead of $144,000 a year, or $44,000 total, you've put in about $30,000 extra. And so you would realistically be able to expect more coming out. Well, wait a minute. We're going the wrong direction. We went from $56,000 to $53,000. Can anybody see why?
Plus the insurance?
No, because we assume now that they're going to retire 5 years sooner. So let me ask you, a little quick poll here. If you were given a choice and you knew you could retire at the normal age of 65 with $56,000 a year, or retire 5 years sooner with $53,000 a year, how many would go for option one? And how many would go for the 60-year-old retirement? You see what I'm talking about? Sometimes time, and isn't that worth it? Well, what if, now let's continue on the progress. What if we did something else here? This example is for somebody that has a 401k or an IRA or some other retirement plans already in place that are going to be taxable when they take them out. Well, if you had a choice in retirement and you had 2 or 3 different options and you didn't need all of them at once, which one do you think would make the most sense to start with? Would you want to take out the taxable one first or the tax-free one first? Keeping in mind whichever one you deferred would just get bigger. Wouldn't it make sense to let the tax-free one get bigger? Go like this. Of course it would. Okay? And so let's say maybe their 401k isn't enough to give them a comfortable retirement for the rest of their life, but it probably is to give them a comfortable retirement for 4 or 5 years. So what if, in this example, you're putting money into age 60, but you're taking it out at 65. So you don't have to start taking it out the same year that you stop putting it in. That gives you a lot of flexibility to adapt to the needs of the client. And what would happen in this case? You go from $53,000 a year to $78,000 a year. Now that's a heck of a pay raise, right? $25,000 a year? Are you kidding me? And all they had to do was spend down their other source first. You're going to come across a lot of people that have those things, and that might be a good way for you to show them a much more exciting option. They may not proceed with your product at $53,000 a year, but that extra $25,000 is extra 25,000 reasons to do it. Okay. What if now maybe they don't have that extra 401k and they feel like they are willing to work to 65? We've done the step up in premium. Up here we did that, but only retired at 60. Now they're putting money into 65 and taking it out then. So what would happen? Well, they put in a little bit more money, haven't they, for that extra 5 years, and they're going to get back $84,000 a year. You know what? If 50,000 was our goal, we are way past that. And we're still going. What if we looked at their situation and we realized that this guy is a really good health specimen. we've been running the illustration at a standard non-tobacco. What if we could go into a preferred non-tobacco rating? Would that make a difference? Well, yeah, because you're paying less for the insurance. That means for the same money going in, there's more for the retirement. How much more? An extra $7,000 a year. Not bad, just for changing the rating. Now, a word of caution. What you don't want to do is run an illustration at preferred non-tobacco by default. Because if it's obvious to you that there's some health issues, meaning maybe they're well overweight, then don't run a preferred rating. Because you're just going to have to come back and show them a higher premium. It's better to under-promise and over-deliver than the other way around. Okay, but look at the payback here. We've gone from 22 years to 6 to 4 down into the 3 to 2 year range. And that's actually normal for us. Most of the illustrations we run, you want to be looking at showing them a full payback of all the money they put in throughout their work years to get a full refund in a matter of a handful of years, 5 years or less. Okay, now what would happen? Well, you know what? This is a fun one. I am not a psychologist. I am not in the business of trying to help people stop an addiction like smoking. But I will say I've actually been successful in helping a lot of people stop smoking. Why? Because I was the only one that showed them enough financial incentive to actually do it. Now, I realized from my parents' experience that smoking is a very addictive thing and not easy to quit. Although my mom did in a heartbeat, and it drove my dad crazy because he couldn't quit. It took him years to do what she did in one day. All right, but here's the point. If you have a big enough reason, if your why to stop smoking is bigger than your why not, all of a sudden it makes sense. Enough sense that you force yourself to quit smoking. So, if I was running an illustration and I knew they were a smoker and that they've given me hints that they would like to stop smoking, then I would come back with 2 illustrations, which by the norm I recommend. Come back with not 1 and not 3 or 4 or 5, but 2 illustrations. If you have 3 or 4 or 5, you're going to overwhelm them and confuse the heck out of them. And if you only have 1, you're not able to go into what we call an alternative choice, where it's a lot more effective to give them 2 illustrations and ask which one they like best than whether they want to do this or not. So you would always want to show them the weaker of the 2 illustrations first. In this case, let's assume that Dave, you're my client and you're a smoker who's for decades been trying to quit. Okay? And so I come back and I show you an illustration where you would have put in the $400, $500, $600 a month to age 65, and you would be taking out $64,000 a year. 212 went in. That's a full payback in just over 3 years. Now, would that make sense?
Sure.
For most people, they'd be thrilled with that.
Absolutely.
And then I would show you, well, what if you were able to quit smoking? And in this case, I would come back and show him this one, and the only difference is preferred tobacco and preferred non-tobacco rates. And the difference to his retirement?
Amazing.
Almost 50% more. Now, you told me on our first visit that if I could pay you $10,000, you'd quit in a heartbeat. Well, you know what? This isn't $10,000, is it? It's $25,000, and it's every year for the rest of your life. We're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars. Finally, you have a big enough reason to quit. Now, you don't want to wait a year until you've quit, because you have to go a year without tobacco in your system. So we need to start today and get you approved and get you going. But you know what? If you can quit any time in the next year, the difference between this starting here or ending up here is going to be minuscule. So let's start with what we can, but let's get you off of those cigarettes as quick as we can. Is that a deal?
Yeah.
All right. Now, let's go back in this case to the preferred non-tobacco rate, and I've been running an increasing death benefit. However, if you run an increasing death benefit all the way for the rest of their life, the problem is they're getting older and older and they're still buying $500,000 of coverage at 60, 70, 80, 90 years old. And it's just getting to be cost prohibitive. The main reason we're using the increasing death benefit is to give them a bigger bucket so that they have the ability to put more money in. Okay? But if they're planning on retiring at 65, then I would suggest change from an increasing to a level death benefit at 65 years old. And let's look at the difference it makes. We're going back to compare to the $91,000 a year because that was the preferred non-tobacco. And we're still non-tobacco, but now we've changed from increasing to level, and it's an extra $4,000 a year throughout their retirement. That could be $80, $90, $100,000 extra to that. You would just need to emphasize to them, now once you're ready to stop putting money in and start taking it out, let Aviva know that you want to change to the level death benefit and show them why. Now, we are about running out of options, but there's a few more tricks up my sleeve. Let's see what more we can do. I don't know how high we can go. Let's find out. What if you come across somebody that has some extra money? Maybe someone like Frank that's starting, but he wish he had started sooner. Most of our clients do. Okay? Well, you can't turn back the hands of time, but what you can do is make up for some of that lost time if they have some extra dollars. And so sometimes they'll volunteer this, and sometimes you need to probe, but this is a good question to ask them. If I was able to show you something you really liked on a monthly basis, let me ask you this. Would you have any available dollars that you could put in on a one-time basis to give it a jump start? Maybe money that's sitting dormant in the bank or in a stock market that you're not happy with. Any money like that at all. And find out what they say. Let's say in this case they didn't have a lot, but they had $5,000 that they could afford to put in one time. If this was you, and you put in an extra $5,000 one time, let's see what kind of extra return it could generate for you. Is this amazing? You're getting back almost $10,000 more for that $5,000 that you put in. But you put it in one time and you're taking it out 20 or 30 times. We're talking about a huge rate of return on that particular $5,000. And yet, I wonder how many times we're missing it if we're not asking for it and they're not volunteering that information. Okay, a couple more steps. What if, and look at this, we're up to over $100,000. We started at $6,000 a year. That's a pretty good rate increase. And this is a good kind of rate increase, one that's increasing your income for the rest of your life. Okay, so what have we done here? Same rating, same lump sum, same step up in premium, but now we're giving it an extra couple of years. Some people say, you know what, I'm starting in my 40s or 50s, I wish I'd started sooner. Well, they can't go back, but they can add an extra couple of years on the back end. Maybe retire a couple of years later. For a lot of people, that's not a big deal. Would it be worth it? Well, let's see what you think. We have to be over 100,000, 104,000. How about 126,000? All right? For working 2 more years to have an extra $20,000 a year in retirement? Now, that's not a bad option for people that maybe enjoy what they're doing anyway. Okay? What's left? What if we have a preferred non-tobacco, still starting with the $400 a month, $5,000 lump sum, we're going back to age 65, they put in a little bit more money and they're pulling out $137,000 a year. Now, wait a minute. Does anybody see how that's possible? We've got the same money going in to start with, right? For the same years as this, we're comparing this to this, and there's over $30,000 a year. Does anybody see why?
Going up to 800 instead of 600.
Exactly. Instead of going 4 to 5 to 600, we went from 4 to 600 to 800 and leveled off there. Can we do that? 8 times 12 months is $9,600 a year that they could put in, and the guideline level on the increasing death benefit was about $14,000. So yes, we can do that. if they're in a position to do that. Maybe they're not. Maybe they are. And what if, last but not least, preferred non-tobacco, $5,000 lump sum, 400 to 600 to 800 a month, and they also give it the extra 2 years. So they're putting in more money and more time. Would it be worth it? A little drum roll, this is the final option here, okay? And the option goes to $166,000 a year for the rest of their life. Of which, how much does Uncle Sam get? None. How much does market risk get? None. Now, somewhere in between $6,000 and $166,000 is an amount that's going to heat their chili, float their boat, and light their fire. And that amount may be different for different people. For most of them, if you can show them around $50,000 a year, you're home free. My point is, we have this product and the capability to show them even 2 or 3 times that much in some cases. Now, obviously, if they're starting in their 40s or 50s, this is probably not realistic at all, unless they can put in thousands a month. Okay? But you know what? There's some people that can put in thousands a month. So find out what they can realistically put in, and then put it through the illustration. Now, what you don't want to do is have to go through this exercise with every illustration for every client. There's no need to. Okay? Why would you want to show them $6,000 a year when you could show them $50,000 or $100,000 a year? So what you want to do is sort of start toward the end, not the beginning. Most of our assumptions, we're going to, typical illustration, we're going to assume the highest interest rate that we can with the software that's available. Presently 8.4%. And the lowest variable loan rate, 4.4%. Now, if you're not comfortable with either of these, you can tone it down, but be mindful that it will affect the retirement income significantly. I would normally recommend now an increasing death benefit to age 65 and then level. I would also normally recommend premiums going in to 65 and then run out an income for life, but I'm making their life 100 years old. Now, you can run it to whatever age they think they'll live to, and you can actually run it all the way out in this product to 121 years old. But most people don't even think they're going to make 100, and that's a nice even number to cut it off at. What you want to show them is that hundreds of dollars a month turn into hundreds of thousands, possibly millions of dollars throughout their retirement years without market risk, without taxes. If that's not enough to get them excited, then their exciter button is broken. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.